I don't do the dating app thing. Or I didn't. Then a buddy told me about singletune.com. Best advice I've had in years. Go look.
So this whole nightmare began on what I thought was just another miserable evening. The kind where you're drowning in your own thoughts and the universe decides you haven't suffered enough yet. You know those nights where everything feels heavy, where even breathing seems like it requires more energy than you have to give? That was me. Looking back now, I'm still not entirely sure whether what happened that night made things worse or somehow better. I guess it depends on how you measure rock bottom and whether hitting it counts as progress. Some people say you have to hit bottom before you can start climbing back up. But nobody tells you that the bottom has a basement, and that basement has a sub-basement. And you might just keep falling through floors you didn't even know existed. It was around 10 in the evening, maybe a bit past that, and I was planted in my armchair with nothing but a single floor lamp casting this weak circle of light around me. The rest of the house had gone dark hours ago, but I hadn't noticed because I'd been so absorbed in what I was doing. The darkness suited my mental state perfectly, like the house itself was reflecting back the emptiness I felt inside. You ever have one of those moments where your external environment perfectly matches your internal state? Where the physical world seems to be conspiring to mirror exactly how you feel? That was my entire house that night. Dark, empty, cold, just like me. I had my legs crossed with this yellow legal pad balanced on my lap, and I'd been scribbling notes and making lists for what felt like forever. My attorney had given me homework, if you can believe that. She'd handed me a manila envelope full of evidence and told me to organize my thoughts, document everything, prepare for what was coming. So there I sat, cataloging the wreckage of my marriage, one bullet point at a time. It's a surreal experience, let me tell you, reducing your entire life with someone to a series of dates, times, and locations. Tuesday, March 15th, 7:30 p.m., Riverside Motel. Thursday, March 24th, 6 p.m., same location. Each line represented a moment when my wife chose someone else over me, over us, over everything we'd built together. Each line was another nail in the coffin of what I'd thought was my life. The private investigator I'd hired had been thorough, I'll give him that. Photos, timestamps, license plate numbers, everything documented with the cold precision of someone who does this for a living. He'd probably seen 100 marriages fall apart. For him, it was just another case. For me, it was everything. When the doorbell chimed, I actually jumped a little. I glanced up and suddenly registered how late it had gotten and how dark everything was beyond my little island of lamplight. My first thought was confusion about who would show up at this hour. My second thought was that it definitely wasn't my wife, because she hadn't come home before midnight on one of her supposed girls' nights in months. That should have been my first clue, honestly. But hindsight is brutally clear. When you're in the middle of something, when you're living it day by day, you don't see the patterns. You make excuses. You tell yourself stories that make sense of the inconsistencies. She's just going through something. She needs time with her friends. Work has been stressful for her. You build these elaborate explanations because the truth is too painful to consider. But once you know, once you've seen the evidence, all those little moments come rushing back with perfect clarity. All those times she was distant, distracted, checking her phone constantly, smiling at messages she wouldn't share. All those nights she came home late, smelling like she'd just showered. All those excuses that seemed reasonable at the time, but now looked like exactly what they were. Lies. I set the legal pad down on the floor, dropped my pen on top of it, and pushed myself up from the chair. That's when the exhaustion hit me like a physical weight. It wasn't the kind of tired you get from working hard or staying up late. This was deeper. The kind of bone-deep weariness that comes from carrying around the knowledge that your entire life has been a performance, and you never even knew you were the audience. It's the exhaustion of realizing that while you were living your life in good faith, someone else was running a completely different program. While you were thinking about your future together, planning vacations, imagining growing old together, she was planning her next rendezvous. While you were being a husband, she was auditioning other candidates for the role. That kind of knowledge weighs on you in ways that physical labor never could. It seeps into your bones and makes every movement feel like you're dragging yourself through concrete. I made my way to the front door and flipped both switches for the exterior light and the hallway light. Through the peephole, I could see 2 uniformed police officers standing on my porch. And let me tell you, that is never a good sign. Nothing good ever comes from cops showing up at your door after dark. In my experience, police at your door at 10 o'clock at night means one of three things. Someone you love is dead, someone you love is in jail, or you're about to be in jail. None of those options are what you want to hear when you're already having the worst few weeks of your life. My mind started racing through possibilities. Had Jean been arrested? Had she done something stupid? Had I done something that could be construed as illegal? I'd been careful, hadn't I? I hadn't threatened anyone. Hadn't done anything but hire a private investigator and a lawyer. That was all legal. That was all above board. So why were there cops on my porch? I took a breath, pulled the door open, and tried to lighten the mood with a joke. What did I do now? I asked, attempting a smile. Neither of them smiled back. This was clearly not a social call. Are you George Bradley? The first officer asked. His tone was all business. Yeah, that's me, I replied, trying to keep things friendly. Is your wife Jean Bradley? He continued without missing a beat. Can I ask what this is about? I said, feeling my stomach start to tighten. You ever notice how police officers never actually answer your questions? Instead of responding, he asked, May we come in? And the officer closest to me actually started to step across my threshold without waiting for permission. I moved to block his path and shook my head. No. I beg your pardon? He looked genuinely surprised, like nobody had ever told him no before in his entire career. I said no, I repeated more firmly this time. I asked you a question so you can either answer it or you can leave. My patience was evaporating fast. He stepped back, but he still didn't answer me. Have you been here all night? The officer pressed instead. I crossed my arms and gave him the kind of look you'd give someone who just tracked mud across your clean floor. Yes, and that's the last answer you're getting until you answer my question. What is this about? I guess I'd given them enough resistance that they figured they could either tell me or waste more time playing games. The senior officer's expression shifted and he spoke in this grave, rehearsed tone. Your wife has been injured and has been taken to Memorial Hospital. It's a weird thing that happens in your brain when you hear something like that. 1 minute you're sitting in your house planning how to dismantle your marriage and divide up your assets, and the next minute you're genuinely worried about whether your wife is alive or dead. The human heart is a complicated, contradictory thing. I'd spent the last 2 weeks hating her, imagining confronting her, rehearsing the speech I'd give when I finally told her I knew everything. I'd fantasize about the look on her face when she realized she'd been caught, when all her careful lies came crashing down around her. I'd imagined her begging for forgiveness, trying to explain, making excuses. I'd played out 100 different scenarios in my head, and in none of them did I imagine feeling this sudden spike of fear and concern. But there it was. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the lies and the photographs sitting in that manila envelope by my chair, my first instinct was to worry about her. Maybe that's what years of marriage does to you. Maybe it's just human nature. Or maybe I'm just an idiot who can't let go even when he should. What happened? I asked, and I meant it. They weren't ready to elaborate yet, though. May we come in? The senior officer repeated. The exhaustion was creeping back in. I let out a long breath, stepped aside, and gestured toward the living room. They walked in cautiously, almost like they were clearing a building in some training exercise, all tense and alert. I flicked on the overhead lights and dropped back into my chair. So now can you tell me what happened? I demanded. The concern was already fading, replaced by irritation. They exchanged a look, and then the senior officer delivered the news. Sir, we regret to inform you that your wife was shot this evening. The words sounded practiced, like he'd said them 100 times before. I realized later that he was watching my face carefully, trying to read my reaction, looking for tells. Is she okay? I asked, and the question came out more forcefully than I intended. Yes, sir. As we mentioned, she's at Memorial Hospital, the senior officer replied. I let that sit for a second while my brain caught up. No, you said she was taken there. You never said if she's alive or dead. Now answer the question or get out. By the end of that sentence, I was yelling. They looked at each other again, and I wondered later whether they were frustrated that they couldn't get a read on me, annoyed that they couldn't intimidate me, or just genuinely unsure how to handle the situation. Finally, the senior officer spoke. Your wife is in surgery now. The outcome is uncertain. Those 2 sentences hit me harder than I expected. It was like someone had punched me in the chest and knocked all the air out of my lungs. I started hyperventilating, which embarrassed me even as it was happening. When I came back to myself, both officers were kneeling beside my chair saying, "Breathe, breathe," and I was nodding like an idiot. My wife had been shot. Someone had actually shot her. Who besides me would even want to do that? Wait, did I just think that out loud? The officers were still telling me to breathe, so I guess not. "Is there anything more you can tell me?" I managed to ask once I'd gotten myself under control. They both stood up and resumed their professional stance, but they seemed more willing to share information now. The senior officer explained the situation. "Your wife was in a motel room with a gentleman friend. As near as we can figure, his wife must have gained entry somehow. She probably just knocked on the door and he answered without looking. Anyway, she emptied most of her clip into him and saved the last few rounds for your wife. Fortunately for your wife, his wife doesn't seem to be an accomplished marksman. A few of her shots went wide, but others found their mark well enough. The boyfriend is dead, but they think your wife may make it. When cops finally decide to share information, they really don't hold back. It all came at me at once, and that's when the real realization hit me. My wife had been in a motel room with her lover, and his wife had found them. His wife had done what I'd only fantasized about in my darkest moments, except she'd actually pulled the trigger. She'd walked into that room and she'd ended it permanently, violently, finally. Part of me felt this sick sense of vindication. See? I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. It was real. It was all real. And now everyone would know. Her parents would know. Her friends would know. Everyone who'd ever looked at us and thought we were a happy couple would know the truth. But another part of me, a part I didn't want to acknowledge, felt something else. Guilt, maybe? Relief? I couldn't quite name it. It was like the universe had taken the decision out of my hands. I didn't have to be the bad guy anymore. I didn't have to be the one who destroyed our marriage. She'd done that, and now someone else had finished the job. "So you're here to see if I was involved?" I asked. Their faces gave away nothing. "We know who did the shooting," the senior officer replied. "But there's always the question of additional involvement. Plus, we need to know that your wife is safe to come home when she's ready." I think that's when I smiled for the first time that entire night. She's been safe the past few weeks, so I don't know why that should change now. They both looked at me like I was missing something obvious. On impulse, I decided to give them a little present. I reached down beside my chair and both officers tensed up immediately. The younger one actually put his hand on his weapon. "Don't wet your pants, kid. It's just an envelope," I said. I handed them the manila envelope that had been sitting beside my chair and continued. "I saw my lawyer today. She gave me a list of things to do, and ironically, she told me to make some more lists." I reached to the other side of my chair and held up the legal pad where I'd been documenting everything for the divorce. The senior officer opened the envelope and started examining the photographs I had of my wife in various compromising positions with a man I'd never met before. The private investigator had done his job well. There were photos from different days, different angles, different locations. The motel parking lot. The two of them walking in together. Coming out hours later. One particularly damning shot showed them kissing in his car before going inside. Another showed her laughing at something he'd said, her hand on his arm, looking happier than I'd seen her look in years. That one had hurt the most when I first saw it. Not the intimate photos, not the ones that showed what they were doing behind closed doors. It was that laugh, that genuine joy on her face. When was the last time she'd looked at me like that? When was the last time I'd made her laugh like that? The answer was, I couldn't remember. Maybe never. Maybe I'd never made her that happy. Maybe that's why she'd gone looking elsewhere. "You fellows want to tell me the name of the man she was with?" I asked. The senior officer spoke without looking up. "It looks like you already know." They were both staring at the photos like teenage boys who'd just discovered their dad's hidden magazine collection. That's when the junior officer spoke up for the first time. "Boy, they really look different without the holes in them," he blurted out. The senior officer shot him a look and reprimanded him right there in front of me. Then, turning back to me, he said, "I'm sorry, sir. That was inappropriate. He's new." I just nodded. I had bigger problems to think about now. My cheating wife was in the hospital. She might make it or she might not. The divorce was on hold for a few days or weeks until we knew how things would shake out. And somewhere in this town, probably in a holding cell at the police station, was a woman named Helen Kowalski who'd done what I'd only imagined doing. She'd confronted them. She'd ended it. She'd made them pay. I should have hated her. I should have been horrified. But instead, I felt this strange kinship with her. She was living my nightmare too. She'd been betrayed too. She'd been lied to too. The only difference was that she'd snapped and I hadn't. Or maybe I just hadn't snapped yet. Maybe I was still on my way there. Maybe that's why I felt compelled to help her, to make sure she got a good lawyer. Because there but for the grace of God, go I. After confirming that I'd been home all night and remembering a very fortunate phone call from my brother that helped establish my alibi, they repeated their warning that I was not to damage my wife when she returned home. I just repeated my earlier response, and they seemed satisfied with that. When they were ready to leave, I got up from my chair and showed them out. I turned off the lights as I walked back to my seat, sat down, and started processing this new information. She'd been shot. I never saw that coming. As much as I hated her for what she'd done to us, to me, I never wished her dead. I wanted her to live a long life full of regret, lying awake at night in an empty bed, untouched and alone. As if that was ever going to happen. People like Jean don't lie awake regretting their choices. They move on. They find someone new. They rewrite history in their heads until they're the sufferer and you're the villain. They tell their friends how unhappy they were, how you didn't understand them, how they had no choice but to seek comfort elsewhere. They make themselves the hero of a story where they're actually the betrayer. That's what people like Jean do. They survive by never accepting responsibility, never acknowledging the damage they cause, never looking in the mirror and seeing themselves clearly. I'd started the evening very deliberately, working through the assignments my lawyer had given me. It had been a good way to keep my mind off the questions that had been haunting me ever since I'd confirmed that my wife was cheating. Now I knew who, but I still had no idea why. Our marriage had its rough patches, sure. She was one of those people who always seemed irritated by something. There were times I could swear she went looking for things to be unhappy about. I hadn't fully realized that until the preparations for divorce had put some distance between us, and I'd started to gain perspective. When you're in it, when you're living with someone day in and day out, you adjust, you accommodate. You learn to navigate around their moods and their triggers. You don't even realize you're doing it until you step back and see the whole picture. Then you realize you've been walking on eggshells for years, carefully managing your words and actions to avoid setting off another explosion of irritation or anger or cold silence. You realize you've been living in a state of low-level anxiety, always waiting for the next thing to go wrong, always bracing for the next complaint. That's not a marriage, that's a hostage situation. Whatever had compelled her to destroy her life had now made me a suspect, to some degree, in a homicide case. The pieces started falling into place, and that's when I realized I wasn't alone in this vile mess of lies and betrayal. There was another sufferer here, another person whose life had been destroyed by the same two people. Helen Kowalski, a woman I'd never met, who'd never done anything to me, but who understood exactly what I was going through. She'd been betrayed by the same man who'd helped destroy my marriage. She'd been lied to by someone she trusted. She'd had her world ripped apart just like I had. The only difference was that she'd reached her breaking point before I reached mine. She'd acted on the rage and pain that I was still trying to process. And now she was going to pay for it with years of her life, maybe decades, locked away in a cell or a psych ward. That didn't seem fair. It didn't seem right. She'd been pushed to the edge, and she'd fallen off, and now the system was going to punish her for being human, for breaking under pressure that would have broken anyone. I called my lawyer's private cell, and she picked up on the fourth ring. "This better be good," Sheila warned. "Or so help me, I'm sending you a bill you'll still be paying off with your Social Security checks." Sheila Goldstein was a shark, and I found a strange sense of comfort in her take-no-prisoners attitude. "Who would have known that a divorce lawyer would have a sense of humor?" I replied. "Who says I'm kidding?" she shot back. "I need you to reach out to a criminal lawyer who works nights." I told her. I heard a crash on the other end of the line. "Tell me you didn't do something stupid," Sheila exclaimed. "No, but someone else did," I explained. "I just had a visit from the cops. The idiot's wife caught up with them and shot them both. He's dead and she's in surgery. The wife needs a lawyer, and I'm betting she doesn't have one." "Listen to me," Sheila said firmly. "Tell me you had nothing to do with this. And for God's sake, say it like you mean it." "I had nothing to do with this," I stated. "Now say it like I'm supposed to believe it," she demanded. "I'm telling you the truth. I had nothing to do with it," I insisted. "The cops were here and they told me about it. I think they were thinking the same thing you're thinking, but I had nothing to do with it. I was sitting in my chair going through the evidence you gave me when they showed up. My brother called me around 8:30 and we talked for almost an hour about a fishing trip he's planning. The cops can verify all of that. I have an alibi. I'm clean. Okay, so why is this your problem? Sheila asked. Why do you care what happens to this woman? It isn't my problem, but I guess misery loves company. If we hadn't had that come to Jesus discussion in your office, it could well have been me. I just want to help her. She did what I wanted to do. She just had the guts to actually do it. Don't say that, Sheila warned. Don't ever say that again. Not to me, not to anyone. You understand? That kind of talk can come back to haunt you. I know, I said. I'm just saying I understand where she was coming from. I understand what pushed her to that point. And I don't think she should have to face this alone. It isn't, but I guess misery loves company. If we hadn't had that come to Jesus discussion in your office, it could well have been me. I just want to help her. I heard a hard, deep breath on the other side of the phone. Okay, Sheila conceded. Do you know where she is? You mean Helen Kowalski? I asked. Was your wife sleeping with another woman's husband? Yes, I mean Helen Kowalski, Sheila snapped. I don't know where she is, I admitted, but they got shot in town and it's a small town, so I'm assuming they have her at the police station. Okay, you stay put, Sheila instructed. I'll call an associate and see if he can get down there. If nothing else, he can babysit her until she gets her own lawyer. I need to go to the hospital at some point, I noted. Okay, you can go to the hospital, but don't be alone with her, Sheila warned. If anything happens, I want 10 feet between you and her with at least 2 witnesses. Got it? Got it, I acknowledged. And George, Sheila added. Yes? I know you. You're conflicted. I'm sorry for what's happening, but you're not responsible and it's going to be okay. You hear me? Her voice softened slightly. Yes, ma'am, I hear you, I assured her. Okay, go do what you need to do. But behave yourself, she concluded. I hung up thinking, did I just say yes, ma'am? Why does she make me feel like a little kid? And why does it work so well? No matter. She was looking after me at a time when I felt lost, and she gave me direction. Now I needed to make her proud of me. I took a shower and changed clothes. A few weeks ago, I would have rushed to be at her side, but Jean had eliminated that love. Now I just had obligations to fulfill, and that included making sure she got proper medical care and the hospital got our insurance information. The divorce could wait. I wasn't going to tear my clothes and wail whatever the outcome, but I would finish my husbandly duties by ensuring that strangers did their jobs. It's funny how quickly love can turn into obligation, how quickly passion can become procedure. A few months ago, if someone had told me Jean was in the hospital, I would have been there in minutes, frantic with worry, desperate to see her, to hold her hand, to make sure she was okay. Now, I was going through the motions because it was the right thing to do, because it was expected, because I had responsibilities. But the love was gone. The concern was gone. All that was left was duty, and even that was wearing thin. As it turned out, I could have taken more time. She was in recovery when I arrived and sedated through the night. I gave them our insurance information, spoke with a surgeon who said that Jean was expected to live, and returned home. They would call me if there was any change or when she was awake. The surgeon had been professional, clinical, detached. He'd explained the injuries, the surgery, the prognosis, all in that calm, measured tone that doctors use when they're delivering information they've delivered 1,000 times before. 2 bullets had hit her, one in the shoulder, one in the abdomen. The shoulder wound was clean, straightforward. The abdominal wound had been more complicated, but they'd repaired the damage and barring infection or complications. She should make a full recovery. He'd said it all like he was describing a car repair. Replace this part, patch that hole, good as new. I'd thanked him and left, feeling nothing. No relief that she'd survive, no grief that she'd been hurt, just nothing. It was long after midnight when I got home. I was exhausted but unable to sleep, so I ran through a mental checklist. Everything could wait until tomorrow, except for one very difficult task. I needed to call Jean's parents. Joe and Marie Castellano. Good people. Salt-of-the-earth types who'd worked hard their whole lives, raised their daughter the best they could, and welcomed me into their family like I was the son they'd never had. They didn't deserve this. They didn't deserve to have their daughter's betrayal and near-end become public knowledge. They didn't deserve to have their hopes for grandchildren and family dinners and growing old surrounded by loved ones shattered by their daughter's choices. I considered waiting until morning, but if she took a turn for the worse and they couldn't say goodbye, they would never forgive me.
Single tune.
Whatever I thought of Jean, her parents had always been good to me. So I picked up the phone and called. The phone rang 4 times before Joe answered, and I could hear the grogginess in his voice, the confusion of being woken from a deep sleep. "Hello, do you know what time it is?" Joe's groggy voice came through the phone. "Yeah, Joe, I know. I had to call," I explained. "Jean has been injured and they've taken her to Memorial Hospital." There was a moment's delay as her father absorbed the information. "Injured? What do you mean, injured?" he asked anxiously. "Joe, she was shot tonight by her lover's wife," I said bluntly. "Shot?" Joe exclaimed. "What the hell are you talking about? Are you drunk? How did she get shot?" "No, Joe, I'm sober," I assured him. "The police were here earlier and I've been to the hospital. She's out of surgery and the doctor says she's going to be okay. They have her sedated, so there's no point in going there tonight. I just wanted you to know." "Are you with her now?" Joe asked. "No, I'm home," I replied. "Shouldn't you be with her?" His tone was accusatory. I was too tired to get angry. "Joe, did you hear me? She was shot by her lover's wife," I repeated. "You're insane. Jean doesn't have a lover," Joe protested. "Yeah, Joe, she does, or she did," I corrected him. "He's dead, but she's going to live." There was silence on the other end of the call, or silence of a sort, as I could hear Joe telling Marie what I'd told him. Eventually, Joe came back to the call. "George, is there any chance you could be mistaken?" he asked hopefully. "About the cheating or the shooting?" I clarified. "Well, both," Joe exclaimed. "No, Joe, I got suspicious and hired someone to watch her about 2 weeks ago," I explained. "I was looking at photographs and transcripts when the police got here. I've been to the hospital and talked with her doctor. It's all true." There was silence again. "What are you going to do?" Joe finally asked. "I'm sorry, Joe, I've already been to a lawyer. I'm divorcing her," I stated. "George, can't you find it in your heart?" Joe pleaded. "I mean, she's been shot and she's going to need you." "I needed her too, Joe, but she was out sleeping with her lover," I reminded him. "So that's it?" Joe asked dejectedly. "Basically," I confirmed. "I'll make sure she's insured through all this, and I'm sure the lawyers will have more to say about finances and such. But I've been lied to too many times. In some ways, that's worse than the closeness. She has lied right to my face, and she did it so well that I never knew. I never suspected." It took a moment for Joe to absorb that. "So what tipped you off?" he inquired. "It was just her being away all the time," I explained. "We used to do things together, but these past few months, she's always making plans that don't include me. I figured that I needed to see for myself, so I hired a guy and he showed me what Jean was hiding from me. After that, my mind was made up. You know, her mom and I were looking forward to having grandkids," Joe said softly. He sounded like a beaten man, and it cut me to the core. I knew they wanted grandchildren, and I wanted us to give them grandkids. "I'm sorry, Joe, I really am," I said sincerely. "Will you do us one favor?" Joe asked. I thought, here it comes. They want me to delay any decision until Jean is better and we can talk. To my surprise, that wasn't it. "Don't be a stranger," Joe requested. "Marie and I think of you as the son we never had. I don't want to lose you, even if you divorce our daughter." I couldn't believe my ears. Through all that had happened, the betrayal, the evidence, the lawyer, the shooting, all of it, this is what made me cry for the first time. Not the discovery of the affair, not the photographs, not the police showing up at my door, not even the news that my wife had been shot. It was this simple statement from a good man who just learned that his daughter had destroyed her marriage and nearly gotten herself eliminated in the process. And his first concern was that he didn't want to lose me. That broke me. That shattered whatever composure I'd been holding on to. I sat there in my dark house with the phone pressed to my ear and tears streaming down my face, and I couldn't speak for a solid minute. Joe waited patiently on the other end, not saying anything, just giving me space to feel what I was feeling. "I love you guys too, Joe. I really do. I promise I'm not going anyplace," I assured him when I could finally speak again. "You and Marie, you're family to me. That doesn't change just because Jean and I are getting divorced. You're stuck with me." "Good," Joe said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "That's good. Marie will be glad to hear that. She's been worried about you, you know, even before all this. She said something seemed off with you two, but I told her she was imagining things. I guess she was right. She usually is, I said, managing a weak laugh. Don't I know it, Joe replied. 43 years of marriage, and I think I've won maybe 3 arguments, and I'm pretty sure she let me win those. With that, we hung up. If I was bone-tired before, I was exhausted now. I lay down in my bed with my clothes still on and fell fast asleep. My dreams were chaotic, fragmented. Images of Jean laughing with her lover. Helen Kowalski standing in a motel room with a tool. Police officers examining photographs. Sheila scolding me like a child. Joe and Marie looking at me with disappointment. All of it swirling together in a confused mess that left me more tired when I woke up than I'd been when I fell asleep. The morning sun woke me, but I wasn't ready to rise. I got up just long enough to pull the shade and climb back into bed for another 2 hours of much-needed but restless sleep. When I could sleep no more, I showered, dressed, and headed out for a bite before going to the hospital. I stopped at a diner I'd been going to for years, ordered coffee and eggs, and sat there staring out the window while I ate. The waitress, a woman named Dolores, who'd been working there since before I was born, asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine, just tired. She didn't believe me, I could tell, but she didn't push. She just refilled my coffee and told me to take care of myself. Small kindnesses from strangers. Sometimes that's all that keeps you going. It was about 11 when I got to Jean's room. Her parents were already there. She was awake and surprisingly alert. I expected her to be still sedated or something, but what did I know? I'd never seen a fire shot sufferer before. She looked pale, fragile, with tubes and wires running from her arms to various machines that beeped and hummed. Her hair was matted, her face drawn. She looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. For a split second, I felt sorry for her. Then I remembered why she was here, and the sympathy evaporated. I walked into her room expecting remorse. Boy, was I surprised. She took one look at me and exploded. "You idiot! You son of a tool! You eliminated him, didn't you? You eliminated David," Jean screamed. So much for, it was just closeness. It didn't mean anything. So now he had a name, David. She'd been sleeping with someone named David, and apparently it had meant something after all. Funny how the truth comes out when people are under stress. All those careful lies, all that practiced deception, and one moment of crisis strips it all away and reveals what was really going on. It wasn't just closeness. It wasn't meaningless. She'd cared about him. Maybe she'd even loved him. And now he was dead, and she was blaming me for it. Suddenly, there were 2 nurses in the room walking quickly past me and 2 orderlies standing next to me. I guess they viewed me as a threat. Joe and Marie were standing by the bed looking horrified, not at me but at their daughter, at what she'd just revealed, at the confirmation that everything I'd told them was true. Marie had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Joe just looked old, defeated, like he'd aged 20 years in the last 12 hours. I looked at her without an ounce of compassion in my heart. "No, his wife eliminated him," I replied coldly. "I guess you 2 got sloppy, or maybe she's just smarter than I am." That took the wind out of her sails. She lay back in her bed and she began to weep. Not the quiet, dignified tears of someone who's genuinely sorry. These were the loud, dramatic sobs of someone who's just realized that their carefully constructed world has collapsed and there's no putting it back together. She was crying for herself, for what she'd lost, for the life she'd imagined with David that would never happen now. She wasn't crying for me, for her parents, for the pain she'd caused. She was crying because she'd been caught and there were consequences, and she didn't like it. I was soon told to leave and happy to oblige. Walking down the hall, I wondered if I ever knew this woman. She clearly never knew me. If she had, she would have known that I would never have eliminated anyone, no matter how much they hurt me. She would have known that I would have just walked away, filed for divorce, moved on with my life. But she didn't know that because she'd never really known me at all. I'd been a role in her life, not a person. The husband, the provider, the one who was supposed to be there while she did whatever she wanted. That's all I'd ever been to her. As I approached the elevator, I was met by 2 security guards. "Sir, may we speak with you?" one of them asked. I looked at them and said, "No, you may not. I've already spoken with the police and they have cleared me. I'm not going to let the screams of a lying, cheating woman give you permission to pretend you have any importance at all. You can call the police if you want, and I'll speak with them. But you'll just look like fools. It's your call, but if you touch me, I'll sue." By this point, I'd had enough. I was done being polite. I was done accommodating other people's assumptions and suspicions. I was done playing nice. The two guards looked at each other, not knowing what to do as I stepped into the elevator to leave. I could see them through the closing doors, still standing there, still trying to figure out what to do. I didn't care. Let them call the cops. Let them file a report. I had nothing to hide, and I was tired of acting like I did. The police never bothered me again. Jean tried to get them to charge me, but when the shooter is caught standing over the body and confesses repeatedly on the way to the station, there wasn't much more for them to do. The detective who'd been assigned to the case called me once, asked me a few follow-up questions, confirmed my alibi, and that was it. He actually apologized for bothering me, said he had to follow up on Jean's accusations, but it was clear I had nothing to do with it. I thanked him for his professionalism, and that was the end of it. The lawyer I hired for Helen Kowalski managed to get her into a psych ward instead of a prison cell. But I sometimes wonder if there's much difference. I visit her from time to time, and I find her as lucid as anyone I know. She once asked me, "Any chance you could smuggle in a hacksaw hidden in a box of chocolates?" That's when I knew she was as sane as you or I. I guess that lawyer was pretty good after all. Sheila's associate had done right by her, argued that she'd had a psychotic break brought on by the trauma of discovering her husband's infidelity, that she wasn't in her right mind when she pulled the trigger. The prosecution had pushed for homicide one, but the defense got it knocked down to manslaughter with psychiatric intervention. Helen would spend a few years in the psych ward, get treatment, and eventually be released. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than spending the rest of her life in prison. During one of those visits, something shifted in my perspective. I was sitting across from Helen in that sterile visiting room with its bolted-down furniture and fluorescent lights that made everyone look half dead. And we were just talking, really talking. She was telling me about her life before everything fell apart, about the signs she'd missed, about the moment she'd finally understood what was happening. She talked about finding the text messages, the receipts, the lies that didn't quite add up. She talked about confronting David and having him deny everything, gaslight her, make her feel crazy for even suggesting he was cheating. She talked about hiring her own private investigator and getting the proof, seeing the photographs, and feeling her entire world crumble. And I realized something that hit me like a freight train. Even here, locked up in a psych ward, Helen had more clarity and genuine presence than my wife ever did. There was no performance with Helen, no carefully constructed facade. She wasn't trying to be someone she wasn't or hide what she was feeling. She was just real, raw, honest. She'd done something terrible, sure, but she owned it. She didn't make excuses or try to rewrite history. She looked at what she'd done, and she lived with it every single day. She talked about the moment she pulled the trigger, about the rage and pain and betrayal that had consumed her, about how she'd felt like she was watching someone else do it, like she was outside her own body. She talked about the regret, not for confronting them, but for letting her anger control her, for throwing away her own life in pursuit of revenge that didn't make anything better. I thought about all those years with Jean, all those conversations where I'd felt like something was slightly off but couldn't put my finger on what. Now I understood. Jean had been performing our entire marriage, playing the role of wife while her real self was somewhere else entirely. Helen, for all her faults and all her mistakes, was at least authentic. She was broken, sure, but she was genuinely broken. She wasn't pretending to be fine. She wasn't constructing elaborate lies to hide who she really was. She was just herself, damaged and honest and real. "You know what's funny?" I said to Helen during that visit. "You're in here and I'm out there, but you seem more free than I ever was in my marriage." She gave me this sad smile. "Freedom's overrated when you're eating mystery meat and taking meds at scheduled intervals." "You know what I mean," I said. "Yeah, I do," she replied. "You mean I'm not pretending anymore? There's something liberating about that, even in a place like this. I don't have to maintain the facade. I don't have to smile and nod and act like everything's fine when it's not. I can just be broken and angry and sad, and nobody expects anything else from me." We sat in silence for a moment, and then she said something that stuck with me. "When you get out there and start over, George, don't settle for someone who needs a script to tell the truth. Find someone who's real. Find your people, the ones who've been through the fire and came out the other side still standing. Those are the ones worth knowing. The ones who've been broken and put themselves back together, they're the ones who understand what really matters. They don't sweat the small stuff because they've seen real problems. They don't lie about stupid things because they know how much lies can destroy. They're just real, you know? That's what you need. Real people. I thought about that a lot after I left. About finding people with real integrity. People who'd survived life's wreckage and came out stronger for it. People who didn't need to perform or pretend or hide behind carefully constructed lies. People who'd been through hell and learned something from it. Who'd been broken and healed and came out the other side with wisdom and empathy and authenticity. A few months later, after the divorce was finalized and I was trying to figure out what came next, I stumbled across this website called singletune.com. It's one of those dating sites, but it felt different somehow. The tagline caught my attention. Your vibe, your tribe. I'd been scrolling through my options, looking at the usual suspects, the big name sites with their algorithms and their promises of finding your perfect match. But they all felt so superficial, so focused on the surface stuff. Height, weight, income, hobbies. Like you could reduce a person to a checklist and find compatibility through data points. That's not what I was looking for. I didn't want someone who looked good on paper. I wanted someone who was real. I sat there staring at my computer screen, thinking about what Helen had said. About finding real people, about surrounding yourself with folks who don't need a script to tell the truth. And I thought, yeah, that's exactly what I need. Not just a dating site, but a place where people who have been through hell and back can find each other and build something real. A place where the survivors gather, where the people who've been knocked down and got back up can connect with others who understand what that's like. A place where you don't have to pretend to be perfect because everyone there knows that perfect is a lie. I created a profile that night. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I wrote about the divorce, about the betrayal, about learning the hard way that authenticity matters more than perfection. I wrote about discovering that my wife had been living a double life, about the shooting, about visiting Helen in the psych ward, and learning more about honesty from a woman who'd committed homicide than I'd learned from years of marriage. I wrote about what I was looking for, someone real, someone who'd been through their own fire and came out the other side, someone who understood that life is messy and complicated and that's okay. Someone who didn't need to perform or pretend, who could just be themselves, flaws and all. And you know what? People responded. Real people with real stories. People who'd survived their own disasters and were looking for connections built on honesty instead of illusions. I heard from a woman who'd lost her husband to cancer and was learning to live again. From a guy who'd been through his own messy divorce and was rebuilding his life from scratch. From people who'd been betrayed, abandoned, broken, and had somehow found the strength to keep going. These were my people, the survivors. The ones who knew that life could knock you down, but you could get back up. The ones who'd learned that honesty and authenticity were worth more than any carefully constructed facade. That's when I really understood what Helen had been trying to tell me. It's about surrounding yourself with people who don't need a script to tell the truth. That's my kind of tribe. The survivors, the ones who have been knocked down and got back up. The ones who learned that being real is worth more than being perfect. The ones who've seen the worst that life has to offer and decide to keep going anyway. The ones who've been betrayed and broken and somehow found the strength to trust again, to love again, to build again. Those are the people worth knowing. Those are the people worth building a life with. I smiled thinking about that slogan. Single tune, your vibe, your tribe. Yeah, that was exactly right. Find your people, the ones who get it, the ones who've been there. Build your tribe with people who have integrity, who've earned their wisdom through hard experience, who know that honesty is the only foundation worth building on. Don't settle for people who perform, who pretend, who hide behind masks and scripts. Find the ones who are brave enough to be real, even when real is messy and complicated and imperfect. Those are your people. That's your tribe. I started going on dates. Some were good, some were awkward, some went nowhere. But they were all real. Nobody was pretending to be someone they weren't. Nobody was hiding their past or their scars or their struggles. We were all just people who'd been through things, who'd survived things, who were trying to build something new from the wreckage of what came before. And that felt right. That felt honest. That felt like the kind of foundation you could actually build on. The divorce went through without much struggle. Jean didn't want me anymore, but she wanted everything we had and everything I would ever have. She had to settle for half and no alimony. The judge was unimpressed with her demands, telling her, "You have a job, Mrs. Bradley. You can work." I'm thinking about having those words tattooed on my arm. Jean's lawyer had tried to argue that she deserved more because of the trauma she'd been through, because she'd been shot, because she needed time to recover. The judge had looked at her like she'd grown a second head and said, "Mrs. Bradley, you were shot while committing infidelity. That is not grounds for additional compensation. You have a job, you have skills, you can support yourself. This court sees no reason why Mr. Bradley should be required to fund your lifestyle after you destroyed your marriage." It was beautiful. It was justice. It was exactly what I needed to hear. Looking back, what I remember most is a terrific lawyer who treated me like a child, guided me, scolded me, and kept me out of trouble. Sheila Goldstein, shark extraordinaire, who charged me a fortune and was worth every penny. She'd been tough when I needed tough, compassionate when I needed compassion, and brutally honest when I needed to hear the truth. She'd kept me from doing anything stupid, from saying anything that could be used against me, from letting my emotions drive my decisions. She'd been exactly what I needed at exactly the right time. Two great in-laws that I still feel close to, and a judge with a lot of common sense. Joe and Marie still invite me over for Sunday dinner. We don't talk about Jean much. She moved to another state after the divorce, started over somewhere else. I heard through the grapevine that she's dating someone new, telling people that her ex-husband was abusive and controlling, and that's why she left. I don't care. Let her rewrite history if it makes her feel better. The people who matter know the truth. As for the ex-wife, I hardly think of her at all. She's become a cautionary tale in my mind, a reminder of what happens when you build your life on lies. Sometimes I'll see something that reminds me of her, a song we used to like or a restaurant we used to go to, and I'll feel a twinge of something. Not quite sadness, not quite regret. Just a recognition that something that once was is now gone. But it passes quickly. I've moved on. I've built a new life, a better life, a more honest life. But I think about Helen sometimes and about that conversation we had, about finding your tribe, your real people, about building a life with folks who don't need to pretend. That's the lesson I took from all of this. Not that people will betray you, though they will, but that when they do, you get to choose what comes next. You get to decide what kind of people you want in your life going forward. You get to decide what kind of person you want to be. And I choose real. I choose honest. I choose people who've been through the fire and came out the other side still standing, still fighting, still real. That's my tribe now. That's the life I'm building. I choose people who've been broken and put themselves back together, who've been betrayed and learned to trust again, who've been knocked down and got back up. I choose people who don't need a script to tell the truth, who don't need to perform or pretend or hide. I choose authenticity over perfection, honesty over comfort, real over easy. Everything else is just noise. All the drama, all the lies, all the carefully constructed facades that people hide behind, and it's all just noise. What matters is finding your people, building your tribe, surrounding yourself with folks who understand that life is hard and messy and complicated, and that's okay. That's what makes it real. That's what makes it worth living. I still visit Helen from time to time. We've become friends in a weird way. She's doing better, working through her issues, coming to terms with what she did and why she did it. She'll be eligible for release in a few years, and I've promised to help her get back on her feet when that happens. Not because I owe her anything, but because she's real. She's authentic. She's part of my tribe now, the survivors, the ones who've been through hell and came out the other side. We understand each other in a way that people who haven't been through it never could. That's what singletune.com taught me in the end. It's not about finding the perfect person. It's about finding your people, your tribe, the ones who share your vibe, the ones who've been where you've been, who understand what you've been through, who don't need you to explain or justify or defend. They just get it. And that's worth more than any carefully curated profile or algorithm-generated match. That's real connection. That's real community. That's what life is supposed to be about. So yeah, I'm doing okay now. Better than okay, actually. I've got my tribe. I've got my people. I've got a life built on honesty and authenticity instead of lies and performance. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything.